Hi, I'm Patty Smith.
This is Bert Newton.
Hey, this is Karen.
I'm Sam from Interpol.
I'm Carlos from Interpol.
This is Martha Wainwright.
Alex from the Orb.
And you're listening to a Triple R archive on rrr.org.au.
And it's my great pleasure to welcome into the studio Colin and Graham from the band. Hi, guys.
Hiya.
Welcome back to Australia. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're a seminal post-punk band.
Are we?
Yes, apparently. How does it feel to be seminal?
I've no idea.
It's probably in the same category as legendary.
Yeah, there wasn't really anything, before the millennial cusp, there wasn't really a category of music called post-punk, so I'm not really sure that it has a lot of meaning to us. I think anyone who aspires to be in a musical genre is probably a little bit sad. I think there's the classification. Everybody, people need to classify something in some way. And so if you can describe a band to somebody or something like that, yes, they sound a bit like so and so, and they're this kind of music. That's fine. But I don't think anyone should aspire to be categorised like that.
Having said that, you did begin at a time when people talk a lot about punk and how it opened doors. You seem to have no limits on your particular sound. Did you feel like that's what was happening at the time, that a new sound was emerging, or were you just doing what you wanted to do?
Well, I think the thing about it at the time was that, it was, a lot of things did happen, and it was a really good energy that there was. And it was not just in music, it was sort of in fashion, and I think a sort of general, outlook on things. And I always felt that, it was an invitation to do what you wanted to do, and you could get up in public and fail, and I think that's always a healthy situation. However, quite quickly people started copying other people who were already doing something which was good, and if you were lucky enough to see the Pistols in the early days, they were extremely funny, and if you got the joke, you got it, but other people took it perhaps a little bit too seriously, and ended up with far too many copycats. We just continued, we started, and we thought it was an opportunity to do something and change, and we never stopped doing that.
The thing about us is that we're a 1977 band. That was when we started. Bands like the Pistols were 1976 bands, and everyone knows that a year in pop time is like 8,000 years in normal time. So there's a gulf of difference. So already we kind of started with the aim of here's a springboard that we can go from, but you don't want to be dwelling too much on the form. You just want to kind of push it out to the next thing.
Because you had people, were doing what we thought were more interesting things. You had people like Perubu in America. It was a more interesting thing. The should we say British punk? I think it's left behind a sort of rather uneven, rather small legacy actually in terms of good music.
Certainly some of the stuff at the time, the dubwise and the ska stuff, and even the electronic music stands up really well today. I was speaking to Johnny Marr not long ago, and he, even though he was after your time, he did describe sort of that era as having a kind of narrow remit in terms of what you should really do, because it was post 70s prog and extremely long songs, one song over 3 albums and that kind of thing, and yet you having a narrow remit enabled him to explore within that territory lots of different things. Did you feel a little bit like you were doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the moment in time. Prog was always interesting in the beginning, and then it kind of expanded rather like a sort of middle-aged spread, really, and it sort of became into something which it hadn't been in the beginning.
Middle-aged and dead.
Yeah, which was inventive, it was, the fashion was for short pieces, short and sharp. I think we accentuated the short and sharp more than any other people at the time.
Yes.
Very
short and sharp in some cases.
Yes, absolutely. But also a kind of like a return to a kind of pop values. I mean, there was by that point, prog musicians looked down on from their lofty heights at stuff like Motown or reggae or anything. I personally always loved all that stuff. I've always liked pop, so I didn't have any problem at all with any type of music. But I was also very quick to kind of become so bored with the whole kind of punk orthodoxy. It did become really, really boring.
Well, that's really evident in like the sort of the three albums as they progressed through the 70s. I mean, you put out an album in 77, 78 and 79, and the changes between them were quite remarkable. In fact, the second album, Chairs Missing, was a pop album, really, by comparison to the first one. Yes
and no. It's different kinds of pop. I think actually, in hindsight, and Pink Flag, for all its strengths, is probably the most conventional album that we've made. Sounds most like other people's music. And I think Chairs Missing started to sound like something else. And in theme, I'm forced to kind of mention the P word, which you dropped earlier in your show. There was an influence of British psychedelia, and we do kind of come from that tradition. But it's now that word's been so overused this year. I'm really kind of I don't any band claiming to be psychedelic. I'm already sceptical.
At the time, though, it was a completely different thing.
It was a completely different moment, and actually that wasn't something that anyone else was drawing on. That was people were more looking for sort of that kind of. It was very Americanized in a way, and a very kind of quite a narrow sort of rock. It's kind of rock and roll kind of thing. I mean, a lot of punk groups were kind of almost pub bands, and there was, I think, I mean, certainly the intention I had and the sense that I had of where I thought we ought to be going was something which was much more quirky and very, very British. It's a very, very kind of British kind of sound. It seemed wrong to be mid-Atlantic in any way. I mean, that was part of the punk thing, but the punk thing did sound very American at times,
You thought of at that time as that being your very creative period, but I think now is probably a very creative period for the band as well. Yeah. And it's almost like with the latest record, Change Becomes Us, that it's the link between the two, because you've gone back to the stuff that you were writing post those three albums, I believe, to sort of dig through that and then sort of recreate it for current era.
Yes and no. I think the reason why we're in a very creative period is partly to do with a kind of a building on an intention within the band. I mean, there has been a sense we hit a low point in 2004 with just everything falling apart, and when we decided that we wanted to do more in 2006 and onwards, it came off a decision of like, we ought to do this. And I think it was the first time we'd really come at Wire with that kind of energy for a long time. And I think even though it was a very fragile beginning, we've gradually built to a point where, I mean, Red Bark Tree, the album that we toured last time we were here, was a strong record, and it was very, very well received. And we knew that we had to come with something better, but that wasn't actually what became Change Becomes Us. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was actually to examine some pieces which were in various states of readiness, including not very ready at all, from that period in the late 70s when the band was falling apart, as a kind of side project for the band. It could be fun to do. We've been integrating Matthew Sims into the band over the period of 2011, and that was, the energy in the band was great. It felt like we could tackle something that was a bit crazy, and then it just turned into the new album, and to much to everyone's surprise, actually, and a good surprise.
Red Bark Tree, however, was different entirely, and again very different to some of your early material, a much more expansive record. How did that particular sound for Wire come about?
I think the thing about Red Bark Tree was it was a return to a certain kind of writing and a certain way of working. We had gone through there was a kind of Send period, and the album that came after it, which is Object 47, were although they sound very different to each other, they have the same kind of methodology in the making, and that is what I would call kind of hip hop. I mean, lots and lots of bands make records like that. I'm not talking about hip hop artists. I'm talking about it's layering. It's taking not necessarily loops, but things and putting them together and making a production like that. I mean, say something like Tame Impala. That's how that record would be made. It's one person doing it with wire. It would be input from a bunch of people, but basically me putting it together. And I started to feel that was not really a very interesting way for a band to make a record. It'd be much more interesting if the songs were written first and then the band worked on the songs together, and then that was the basis for the production. And in other words, in a way, it's a kind of old school idea, but it's a classic idea and it works.
It's a bloody good way of making music.
It is, because you get everyone's input in real time.
Are we talking about a intensive rehearsal process before the album's made?
With a lot of change becomes as what happened in terms of context was that we toured a lot after we came here, I think at the beginning of 2011, and then we toured a lot, and we were offered a second UK tour, and we felt we couldn't go out and just do what we'd already played in the spring, should we say. And that gave us cause to actually examine that material and see if we could find essence of something which was useful, and see if we could transcend its rather, what should we say, fragile past.
And time limited.
And time limited. So we took 7 of those things which we'd rehearsed up out onto the road, and they really stood up. You know what I mean? They got better and better, and that gave us the energy and sort of confidence to think we could then go into the studio and take, should we say, examine 7 fossils or whatever they were, and see if we could actually bring them to life as well. Because it wasn't about sort of trying to go back to a 1979 retro sound or something. That was totally irrelevant. What we were trying to do was use material as a basis to apply the aesthetic and the strengths of what was ostensibly a new band with Matthew playing, and it worked. It was a chance, but it worked. And in a way, it wasn't that surprising because the band was very, very strong, because of the amount of work it had done.
I mean, the thing to bear in mind is that actually this isn't put together in a rehearsal room. We do it in the studio, but we work really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not the Rolling Stones spending 6 months in the studio. This is the recording sessions for Making Change becomes us for a week.
Have you always worked really fast and you prefer to work that way?
Absolutely. When I write songs, I write very fast, and I bring it to the band, and it's completely an open book. I play acoustic guitar or electric guitar depending on what it is, and sing, and everybody makes the arrangement around it how they feel, and it's a matter of just trusting. You might think, we might discuss between us, well actually that would be better if we did it like that, but those discussions are very fast. It's like, so you'll have it on the third take after everyone's tried it for the first time. I
find it takes a bit longer to write words then. So you know what I mean, there is preparation and work does happen before.
Now, of course, people have cited you these days as being influential. Along the way, though, it seems to have happened at various points in musical history, from mainly starting around about the 90s with Britpop, and of course we had Elastica borrowing heavily from Three Girl Rumba, and people
among other tracks,
yes, and people citing listening to you as an influence. And then start of 2000, it happened a lot with bands like Franz Ferdinand and Block Party being very influenced by this era of music. Do you think people have always liked to look back at sort of very exciting times and times in music when something new really kicked off for their own inspiration.
I mean,
I can hear that, but I think the thing about it isn't good music, and the better stuff sort of does transcend its time.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things which are made at a time, and that's where they stay, or that's where they should stay. But I think, particularly if, like everybody, you know what I mean, it's like if you're a young band, then you're looking to what is inspiring, and I think, that's what one still does, you know what I mean? You absorb what other artists are doing, and then you produce your own, you synthesize that.
I think the other thing is that, since around the mid part of the last decade, I think the concept of a timeline in music has completely disappeared. There is no timeline. Everything is current. So therefore, it's about there is one thing, and that's fame and obscurity. Wire is the most famous band you've never heard of. So a lot of musicians like Wire, partly they want to drop the name of it because it's not the same thing as like everyone, all their mates have never heard it. So it's got that kind of. I'm being a bit cynical here, but it does seem to go from generation to generation. I know a lot of people in young bands in London right now who are just huge fans of what we do, and it makes it. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting that you can make those kind of connections, and people are really interested in what you're doing.
I think it also helps, because of our our disruptive timeline. When you're not around, it's an awful lot easier to quote somebody who's not active. You know what I mean? So, if you leave ideas lying around, other people will use them. And that's a good thing. But it is a curious thing that, when we came to making what became Wire, we came at it as being, in a way, non-musicians. And it's a kind of a curious thing that we've become a band that musicians enjoy, and that's quite strange, really.
What's most curious, surely, about the whole thing is that, the bands can name check you, thinking that it's going to be a band other people haven't heard, that it is a band that a lot of people haven't heard, considering the strength of some of the songs, even like commercially, the strength of songs like The 15th and Three Girl Rumba and Kidney Bingos and whatever.
God knows. How can you explain that? In some ways, that served us, because it means that we've always been a bit underground, and that makes us very appealing in many ways. And we're not bloated, over rich rock stars. We're playing here in clubs or pubs. Actually, that's what you mainly have here. There's no. We don't play in super large venues anywhere.
The thing about it is, you're not. You know what I mean? Most people, I don't know. You know what I mean? Success can be quite a curse, I think. You know what I mean? Because people actually get stuck in time, and people won't allow them to change, move on.
Yes.
And it is, I think, you see that with people, and they're cursed, and there was a fantastic programme on, it was BBC Radio 4 a few months ago, and that's what it was about, called One Hit Wonders, and it was absolutely extraordinary hearing people's nightmare, who'd entered something with great enthusiasm, with all the creative ideas that they had, and then they got nailed to the wall, you know what I mean, by one tune or something. That didn't happen for us, for various reasons. Record companies making a mess of things, there's all sorts of things, but in the end, you know what I mean, that is our silver lining, is that we've just been able to continue in our own bloody-minded fashion.
And on the other side of it, we have, within a certain section of the community of music, quite a lot of fame, and which we're, so the doors are always open to us. It's not a hard, I've been running
It's a
record
privilege,
label.
isn't it?
I've been running a record label for quite a long time and working with other artists.
Right.
And I know how difficult it can be to break new artists, and I know how easy it is with Wire.
Would you call this band, for the want of a better word, your career in your life?
I hate that word.
Yeah,
I
it's
really
the
hate
wrong
that
word to use.
It's the wrong.
I guess what I'm saying is it the passion that's been with you for the majority of your life?
I think the thing that drove me when it all went completely, in a mess in 2004. I kind of looked at it and thought, well, you know what? When I die, it doesn't really matter what I say. I'm going to be that person from Wire. So what do you do about that? You either own it, or you try and run away from it. What's the point in running away from it? Own it, be it. That's okay. I do lots of other things. It's not the only thing I do. It's not the only thing that Graham does. It's not the only thing that Matthew does. We're fully rounded human beings, and we do a lot of stuff. But this Wire thing, making it good, is really is a mission. It's something, and it's exciting to be involved in. We're in a very, very good place right now as a band, and we have plans stretching up to 2017 right now. In terms of the concrete ideas of the things that we're doing, a timeline, the way in which we want to go about things, and things are opening up to us in ways which would have been unimaginable even 10 years ago.
We're going to have to wrap this up, but just on that and this creative period you have now, and of course the creative period of music when you began, they're both, even though there's no timeline, they are both in different times of history that are radically different, and yet there's a similarity to them. When you started, the whole DIY ethic was happening, and now you've got something similar with the internet where things kind of become very, very DIY. What changes have you seen in the music industry over the years?
It's a hard question to because it is really different.
Yes.
I mean,
I don't think anybody knows yet, really.
Yeah.
That's the thing, isn't
it's
it?
developing.
I think that's what perhaps is the biggest parallel, because when the punk thing happened, it was a time of there was a window there where people were actually able to make it up. You know what I mean? Sort of redraw the rules. It didn't last for so long because the major companies made sure they grabbed hold of it and made distribution. Because they had the distribution, they were able to slow a lot of things down. I think one of the parallels is also that everybody's playing live a lot more, because obviously people aren't selling as many CDs, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's back to that thing again of people actually wanting to go and experience something, get energy from that, rather than it being, I suppose, in that end of the prog thing, it was rather a passive activity as well, people getting stoned and sort of being at home, I suppose, on the sofa.
I've seen a lot of people manning their own merch desk now as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there is. I mean, we've become, through Pink Flag, which is our label, which I run. We're the absolute kings of the cottage industry.
That sounds.
I mean, it is. It
sounds rather dodgy. Doesn't it? I'm a king of the cottage industry.
I don't want to be like a second-hand car salesman. But the thing is that our merch stand has stuff from across the label.
Actually, if you'd said if you were the queen of the cottage industry, it'd have been even funnier.
Well, I could be, but I mean it is a thing of the idea. I think if we have anything to present to the world on that side, that is, if you pay attention to how things work, if you try and understand how industry and business works, you're going to do an awful lot better if you do it on your own, because you can very easily sell away any possibility you have for the future by just going for some rather paltry advance early on. Yes, it's very difficult to go from 0 to even 10 on a scale of 100, but believe me, if you've got a bunch of mates that like what you do and they'll come to gigs, I mean, there's your start right there. you can, it's possible. It's possible.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming in. And of course, people can catch you playing live tonight at the Corner Hotel.
Yeah.
It hasn't sold out yet, I don't think, but
I'm not sure.
Tickets probably on the door, but I think that's going to be a pretty busy gig, and should be a lot of fun. Will you be covering music from the breadth of your entire career?
Yes.
Stretching back to the Big Bang.
All the way.
We play what's interesting and what's comfortable. There's no obvious, let's play the greatest hits. A, we haven't had any, and B, we'd never agree on what they were anyway.
Exactly.
So, but
it's from year zero to the future. That's where we're going.
Well, thanks so much, guys, for coming in.
Pleasure.
thank you.
Triple R.
For complete access to the Triple R archives, which include over 100 interviews, live-to-air performances, documentaries and other Triple R specials, become a subscriber via the link on our website. Thanks for listening to Triple R.